Well, thanks, Amadeo, for taking up 3 minutes of my half an hour.
You still need to be fast.
All right, well, thank you, and good morning, everyone. I'm really pleased to be here, and boy, this is a really great sold-out audience. If we'd have been in the other room, we'd have been cheek to jowl, I'm sure. But I'm here to give you a little bit of an overview of not only some of the international things that I've been exposed to, but some of the Canadian stuff as well. We have been talking about small, rural, remote, and even indigenous communities all across Canada. I've had the fortune of being able to take the time to travel over the last 3 months, like every day, and see some of the communities that we have here across Canada. And I'm really pleased to be able to share some of those experiences today and tell you that things are actually on the up and up here. There are really good opportunities in rural, remote, and small to medium-sized communities all across Canada, and we'll be very competitive on the global stage if we do the right things. So I'm going to be talking about this concept here of broadband-enabled rural communities, but looking at it a little differently, not just about smart cities, but also how to take the smart cities and create intelligent communities. You heard Stephen talk about Maslow. Well, we're actually looking at working towards the apex, towards intelligence and wisdom. But let's start off with a little bit of a test. What small community in Canada is the best place to actually, well, not just small, what is the best place in Canada to start a business? And the Federation of Independent Businesses in Canada assessed 125 communities, Montreal, Toronto, Vancouver, et cetera, with a number of metrics. Well, spoiler alert, Whitehorse. Whitehorse is the best place to start a business. And, we were just up in Whitehorse a couple of weeks ago, and there are tremendous things afoot happening there. We could talk a little bit about some of the things that are taking place. I won't go into that, but just look at the list. The top 10 communities are all small. Collingwood, Ontario, 6, with Grand Prairie, Alberta. Canada's largest urban communities aren't really part of this list. They get onto it eventually. Look, where's Toronto? 33 on this particular list. Well, there's some really significant things about what's happening in each of these small communities that are common. Northlight and Whitehorse is a fantastic innovation hub, but it's not just a makerspace and a place where people can come together and share some stories. It's also where they have the Economic Development Agency. They have their Development Yukon there. They have opportunities for the coming together of the college and many other things. So there's a real nexus of opportunities taking place there. In Winkler and in Grand Prairie, they have very similar kinds of activities. In Kelowna, the Innovation Hub, reminds me of the one I just saw in Rochester, very similar to it, bringing together not only the innovation hubs, but many other activities around it, Sherbrooke's as well. So these are fantastic experiences that you will see when you go to many of the small communities. But there's a problem. And it's not just about broadband or Wi-Fi being put into communities. It's about people. And you hear this story over and over again. What happens when kids become a little bit educated and want to take their education and do something with it in New York or Toronto or Vancouver? Hard to get them back. So part of this story is about people creating talent, keeping that talent in your community, or attracting them back, or attracting new people. The hardest thing is to keep them there. The Knight Foundation did a study many years ago. At one point they talked about, well, you got to have affordable housing, you have to have really good mobility, and you have to have things to do in a community. They refined it. It's now about all those social offerings. You have to feel like you're part of the community. You have to have that sense of openness. It has to be transparent. It has to be ethical. This concept of an ethical smart city is one that will keep you in a community. Another thing, pride. You have to have pride in your community. You have to have good urban design. You have to get good aesthetics started in your community to give you a sense that this is a place that I'm not only proud of, but I want to bring people to and share that pride with them. And a lot of communities are beginning to recognize they have to put in the bike trails. They have to put in the public spaces. They have to have the little restaurants and cafes that people can come together on. And that is that element of things to do in a community that's very important. And in many communities, people are beginning to experience the exodus from urban areas into their communities. My son could not afford to live in Toronto. Well, he moved to Waterloo. He could have also moved to some other community further afield to be able to afford to live there. He found a job, and now he's happy. He doesn't want to come back to a big city. He's going to stay in a relatively small community. And that's what's happening pretty much everywhere. Affordability is very important. But it's not just about affordability. It's also about the fact that a lot of very smart people are beginning to go to some of these smaller communities. Talk about Waterloo. Go to Communitech. You will see that there's a waiting list of people wanting to go there, not only from parts of Ontario, but from all over the world. 10, 15 years ago, you wouldn't have had that experience. So, what's happening in our communities in Canada? There's a real need to come up with a broadband strategy and a rural strategy, and to mix those in Canadian terms across Canada. Now, there's some discussion around this, but it's very disparate and it's very unorganized. We're part of it in terms of this thing called the Community Solutions Network. It stems from a thing called the Smart Cities Challenge. Infrastructure Canada put out a call a couple of years ago. We promoted it. We saw about 200 communities get engaged. 130 made applications for one. 20 were finalists. They got $250,000 to play around with their little test bed. And out of those 4 that were winners, Montreal got $50 million, focusing on some of their AI and innovation stuff that they're doing there. A little town called Bridgewater in Nova Scotia got $5 million. They're working on an energy program. Guelph and Wellington County, they got $10 million. They're working on a food program related to broadband. And finally, Nunavut in the north. The indigenous communities there are developing makerspaces to help sort of curb the really terrible deaths that are happening with the kids there. The suicides. Why? Because sport, if any of you have seen the movie Grizzlies, is helping in terms of that, but also the concept of these maker spaces where these kids, not just kids, anybody in the community, could come and begin to experience making things. And sometimes that's really low tech, but oftentimes it also includes levels of technology. So we're beginning to see a lot of these smaller communities benefit. There's a lot of different kinds of groups that are coming together to work. Federation of Canadian Municipalities, there's a tax, a gas tax that's going to be helping the First Nations communities. There's other work that's being done, including the Smart Cities Challenge, and programs like SWIFT. Now, I've heard various stories. It's a good program, it's not such a great program, it's not happening as well as it should be funded better, all those sorts of things. Fact is, it's happening, or it should be completed, and it should, in fact, be a very robust service across southwestern Ontario. But regardless, we need to accept the fact that there are opportunities. Not everybody, like the United Nations says, 70% of the population by 2050 is going to be in urban areas, in great megacities. 30%, or maybe we can even nudge it to do more and better, are going to be in rural areas. Let's create an experience. Let's create a situation where people actually benefit from being in those rural areas. A friend of mine, Roberto Gallardo, is one of those global experts on rural matters. He's from Purdue University, and he has said that rural communities are no longer in the middle of nowhere. There's a really great experience that people can have. They can work from anywhere. Obviously, robots are taking place in many urban centers, but robots are taking place in rural areas as well. They're just different. You'll hear from Mitch Thompson later on about Olds, Alberta, and the kinds of smart farming applications that might be taking place there because of the kind of Wi-Fi that's experienced. Stratford, Ontario, with the Wi-Fi that's in their community. Ubiquitous Wi-Fi has attracted autonomous vehicle experiments in that small community of 32,000. There are all sorts of things that you can do now in rural areas that decades ago you couldn't do. But now you can do everything more or less in a rural area that you can do in an urban area. It's just scaled differently. Now, it's not in all rural areas, and that's the problem. But those things that you can do, we should continue to encourage and try. And maybe it's a bit of an experiment in some cases. They don't all have to be Toronto's waterfront with sidewalk labs experiments. Let's look at things that can be done in a rural area, and you can have your own rural lab as part of that experience. Well, you can undertake a virtual reality tour, just like in an urban area. But the big thing is you can also just take that thing off and experience it for real. And I think that that's part of the benefit of being in a rural area. You get the opportunities to do both. It's a little more difficult to do some of that other stuff in big urban areas. So I think that real great opportunities exist. We need to figure out strategies to encourage people to actually come and stay in these rural areas. A couple of key things. One is create those opportunities for people to actually experience the rural areas. They don't necessarily have to be the same experiences as in an urban area. People need to learn about what those benefits are in a rural area. I went from New York to Toronto to Waterloo. And in Waterloo, I experienced those smaller and medium-sized experiences that I never experienced in those bigger cities. I also worked in places in Newfoundland and Fredericton. Very different experiences going constantly down that path. They're all worthwhile. And I think that broadband experience adds that dimension in those rural areas that people probably previously didn't have an opportunity to benefit from. But we have challenges. There have to be opportunities to change the way that people think. There was a slide that Stephen or someone put forward, maybe it was Rob, that you have to change the mindset. Local mindset is very difficult to change. People hate change. They don't like change. They're pretty comfortable the way it is. But if we can get people to start thinking differently in some of these smaller communities, maybe things can turn around. We also have to provide different technology limitation changes. No data caps. The ideas behind parity need to be expressed, and so forth. Now, the reality is people in rural areas don't have the level of education in some cases, and they need to attract the talent. I'm going to show you a video in a few minutes where talent is really important. It has changed the way that the community not only has created different opportunities, but has adopted and enabled broadband to do much more for them. And I think changing that mindset is a key thing. We traveled across Canada and the United States over the last year, and one of the key things people said to me was, how do we get started? We don't even know how to pull together and enable and empower the local community. So we wrote a book on how to get started. It's all free. You can download it off of our website. People have difficulty even breaking down the smallest of silos in a community. And that is, I think, a key element of the importance of it. Now, we recognize that in urban areas, it's going to continue to be a place where people are going to go. Obviously, they want to meet other people. They have experiences that rural communities don't necessarily have. But I think with digital parity, with strategies that you can develop around rural and small communities, that experience is something that you can educate people about. Things like attracting them to come and experience your markets, doing tours or trails, or giving them an opportunity to experience walking and running trails in your backyards. It's amazing how people who are in urban areas may not have that same kind of experience, and they could benefit from learning more about the softer sides of the community. So, where are we? We're looking at opportunities for, okay, I'm still on. We're looking for opportunities for communities to think through a strategy. Well, we have developed a strategy at the Intelligent Community Forum, and many communities have been following it. Big urban centers as well as rural communities. And it starts off with recognizing smart infrastructure is your base. You really have to have that done well. Whether you have Wi-Fi and broadband in place, but you also need to have all those other things. Good roads, rail. If you're next to a seaport or a waterfront, embrace those and take advantage of them. So it's infrastructure, but also smart infrastructure has to be part of that base. But that is what we refer to as a smart city. When you go to the next levels, and we have other indicators, it's all about people. We talk about the need to embrace talent and knowledge workforce. Unless you bring that equation into the development of your community, and many rural communities don't have that element in it. But I'll show you a video in a few minutes where a town of 15,000 people have embraced it. Stratford recently brought in an educational institution at 32,000 people. We have in Olds, Alberta, we have for 9,200 people, the Olds College. And so it's really important to think in terms of talent development. But that's not where it should end. It needs to be talent attraction, and finally, talent retention. And all of those strategies have to be part and parcel of your strategy in the community. Next thing is, when you've got smart people and you have smart infrastructure, now you can innovate. You need to be able to take that innovation ecosystem and start to apply it. There are lots of different pieces to the innovation ecosystem. Strategies like maybe the municipality has open space that they can develop, or they might have some buildings that they can give over to a makerspace, or some aspect of it that in the community you can generate to create that innovation ecosystem. Once you have those pieces, you need to look at what prosperity might in fact give you, the opportunities to develop a sustainability strategy, which of course means that you develop in it programs that allow you to think about being agile and resilient in your community. Look at the kinds of disruptions that are going to be taking place, whether it's climate change or it's technology itself or globalization that might in fact have an impact in your community. You need to have sort of a backup strategy, and that's where we say it's important to have that. The next thing is, I mentioned ethical smart cities. Well, looking at the digital divide, looking at the opportunities that everybody can participate, that strategy of all boats rising with a rising tide is really important as part of smart and intelligent communities. And so when we talk about open smart cities, when we talk about ethical smart cities, it's important also to think about the opportunities around digital equity and equality. Finally, all of that comes together under the idea of advocacy, making sure that at the community level you provide opportunities for empowerment and engagement of every citizen. Look at the pushback that's taking place in Toronto with Sidewalk Labs. The strategy had been there from the beginning to say, look, we're really going to talk about it from the bottom up, not somebody saying, well, it's a real estate play from the top down. There are different ways to approach that, but it's really important that you have very good leadership, that you nurture leadership at the community level, that you look for collaborative solutions, and you bring together the people so that you can develop really good public policies. Once you have those good public policies, that stability in the community will start to attract investment. That investment coming into a community needs to understand that you have good governance in place so that you can do the things to not only attract that investment so that investment stays and is able to prosper as a result. So we're going to go quickly through some of those indicators. Broadband, well, let's see what this community has to say. Can we start the video, please?
The Olds Institute for Community and Regional Development evolved out of a committee that was formed to support the town manager, who did economic development for the community at the time. The function of the Olds Institute was to grow and develop the community in a sustainable way. It has been 13 years since the Olds Institute was conceived. The organization has grown from a few volunteers and a seed of an idea into an organization with 10 standing committees, 2 operating businesses, and 150 volunteers. Our business models fund a large portion of the work that we do. They enable us to be fully sustainable and give back to the community as well. ONET has been a tremendous opportunity that we are realizing in the community. It's an opportunity that others will realize in the future as well. We are attracting new businesses and making those who operate here more competitive. Both the Olds Institute and the Olds Connected Community Network were designed with a goal or function in mind. This functional architecture continues to empower and be a catalyst for our sustainable future. When community members buy into the subscription of services from ONET, they are supporting the Olds Institute, supporting the many volunteers and community members who have a passion or a vision for a better tomorrow. The dollars and cents that come from these operations help afford us the opportunities that we will realize in the future.
In 2004, the community of Olds and the Olds Institute for Community and Region Development were thinking about economic development and how it was impacting the way people lived, worked, and played in our town. One concern we focused on was an accelerating brain drain as the community's most talented young people were leaving in search of opportunity. The Olds community directed the Institute to explore the options of connecting to Alberta's SuperNet, which at that time was being built across the province, and the Institute saw this as a tool to maintain the town's status as a vibrant entrepreneurial community. From that direction, ONET was born. ONET is 100% owned and operated by the Olds Institute, representing and responsive to the needs of the Olds community. The network is Canada's first community-owned and community-based fiber utility infrastructure. Our network has been designed to be profitable and repay our debt at a 30% take rate. We feel this is conservative and replicable in other communities, and we are prepared to share our story with any community in the province and help them to build their own fiber project. Starting 3 years ago, we completed our first connection to a customer. Last summer, ONET introduced its 1 gig bandwidth service and has since been ranked as having Canada's fastest internet speed. The community conversation has changed from "I'm not sure" to "you have to connect to ONET." We have seen a stabilization in our businesses, seen some new businesses in the community directly attributed to the network, and a sense of ownership for the network is beginning to happen. We have had numerous other communities watching activities with interest, and some are carefully planning on how to do this for themselves. The community is slowly turning into a tech-savvy population, starting with businesses and at the school and at the college. This community continues to learn in technology, and I don't think it will ever end. Thank you for listening to our story.
Okay, there we go. So you'll be hearing from Mitch, who you saw on the screen later. He'll be one of the panelists in one of the sessions later today. This is a great model. This is a community that has said, we're going to take destiny into our own hands and we're going to do something about it. They're not perfect, but they're working towards it, and it will in fact attract investors, and it'll help to keep some of that talent that's coming out of the college to be kept in town and help to grow in that community. But what if you don't have an ONET? What if you can't take advantage of piggybacking on the Alberta SuperNet in this particular case? What if you're really remote and maybe cellular or other connections aren't an opportunity for you? Well, maybe satellite has to be an opportunity for you. May not be the greatest, but let's see what they have to say about it. Let's run this particular video.
I'm lost in the woods and I can't connect to the internet. Goodbye, cruel world. If you believe tech companies like SpaceX and Google, problems like this will soon be a thing of the past. They have plans to connect our entire planet. Even the most remote areas. Sounds good. But how is that supposed to work? Do we really need that? And what could be the problems? Let's have a look.
1, 2, 3, 4.
When talking about global internet access, we see that there are big differences from country to country. While 96% of South Koreans are regularly online, only 5% of the people in the Central African Republic use the internet. That doesn't sound very fair. But getting our whole planet wired with cables is far too complicated and too expensive. There could be a solution though. Wireless internet from up there. Wireless internet basically works like this. A high cell tower with a wide reach sends a signal to some lower towers with a smaller reach. And cell phones connect to these lower range towers. So far, so good. But the further away we are from the towers, the worse the connection gets. And if only a few people live in a remote area, it's not very likely that a telecommunication company will invest money in the infrastructure there. So, companies like SpaceX and Google say, why not get higher up to expand the radius? Their strategies are different. SpaceX wants to connect the world with their Starlink project. That's basically a system of small satellites. They weigh about 200 kilograms. SpaceX rockets are supposed to bring them into orbit at an altitude of 340 to 1,150 kilometers. Once activated, the satellites receive a signal from ground stations. They send it back to Earth with a much wider range than would be possible from the ground. But they also connect to one another. That makes the system more stable and guarantees faster transmission rates. The first satellites are already up there. SpaceX installed 60 of them in May 2019. They're supposed to cover areas in the US. To bring the service to the whole planet, Starlink would need about 12,000 satellites. Estimated costs, $10 billion. Alphabet, Google's parent company, isn't aiming that high. Literally. For their Project Loon, they're developing a system of balloons. Hence the name Loon. The balloons carry transmitters into the stratosphere, which then connect to each other. At an altitude of about 18 kilometers. The system works similarly to SpaceX, but at a much lower cost. The balloons have a big disadvantage. They're still rather fragile and function for about 200 days only. After that time, they navigate back to places where Google workers can pick them up. The Starlink system will be built to last. Another problem. In the stratosphere, the balloons are subjected to winds. But because it's Google, they take the disadvantage and turn it into an advantage. By analyzing vast amounts of weather data, they want to make use of the winds to navigate their balloons to the areas where they're needed. And Project Loon has a huge overall advantage. It can establish connectivity pretty quickly. After Hurricane Maria hit Puerto Rico in 2017, hundreds of thousands of people were cut off from the internet. Within a very short time, Google set up a balloon network that was, among other things, crucial for coordinating the efforts of relief organizations. The answer is yes, at least in areas that are populated but remote. A lot of social interaction isn't possible without the internet. And apart from that, it's absolutely crucial when it comes to running a business. Chains of supply, transaction, customer care, it's all done online. So if we don't want parts of our world to be completely cut off and never be able to get a chance to thrive, we should support any development in that field. Wireless connections might not be as fast as cable networks at the moment, but they could at least cover the basic demands of private people and businesses. Some people say access to the internet should be a basic human right. And that's indeed a wonderful idea. If you use it wisely, it can help you educate yourself and you stay connected to people that matter to you. But private investors like Google and SpaceX are driven by commercial imperatives rather than a sense of responsibility towards society. You might say, no problem, the market will handle that. But we can already see what it could lead to when a big tech company also provides internet access. Facebook started its project internet.org in 2013. It's supposed to provide free internet services to customers in developing countries. To make that possible, Facebook cooperates with local telecommunication companies and smartphone manufacturers. They offer the service as part of their packages. The project runs in 63 developing nations. Via the app Free Basics, users are granted a very limited access to the internet, with Facebook services at the core. Sounds like a fair deal, as long as it's free? Not really. Critics say it's a blatant strategy to extend Facebook's dominance to the developing world. It's also been accused of violating net neutrality by strictly controlling participating sites in order to eliminate Facebook's competitors. So, what would happen if one big tech company became the worldwide dominator in the field of connectivity supply? What do you think? Let us know in the comments. And if you've got a digital topic you'd like us to cover, let us know as well. Hope you enjoyed this video. Bye. I'm lost in the wood.
So, broadband is very important. Connectivity is very important, however you get it. But at the end of the day, it's really, again, about people. And so that's why we start to really talk about things like talent. And how do you get that talent into your community? How do you create it? And more importantly, how do you keep it there or attract it so that others can, in fact, come as investment into your community and participate? So talent and knowledge work created is very important. So let's see what this video has to say about it.
Welcome to Mitchell, South Dakota, USA. Now you may not have heard of us, but we're home to an iconic landmark, the world's only Corn Palace. Mitchell's a city of about 15,000. Serving a rural trade area of about 50,000. Just to give you some perspective, this is us. And this is New York City. We kind of fit in right here. Those on the coasts might think of this as flyover country, but don't underestimate the power we pack into 12 square miles, and we have for hundreds of years. In the late 1990s, a high-speed fiber network was installed, connecting every home, office, and business in Mitchell. We've used that connectivity to reach out to the world with one of North America's best and fastest broadband systems. Our efforts have ensured our stability and viability, and we continue to look to the future. It wasn't without obstacles, but the vision and perseverance of community leaders paid off, and it wasn't long before big things started happening in this small town. All of Mitchell's school children have access to fiber-fast connections in every classroom. Students as young as kindergartners participate in our public K-12 one-to-one program, putting a tablet or laptop in the hands of every one of our enrolled students. Yes, every single student. You see, when your population is not as big, the possibilities are. Our higher education institutions also took advantage of the network capabilities. Both Dakota Wesleyan University and Mitchell Technical Institute offer unique educational options both on campus and at a distance. Our regional healthcare provider, Avera, has a strong presence in Mitchell. With their 13,000 employees statewide, they've been early adopters of leading-edge e-medicine technologies. They're saving lives and making a difference. Emergency medical services personnel even use technology to connect with our local emergency department while still at the scene of an injury, accident, or other crisis. These e-medicine technologies are advancing the standard of care in all rural areas and changing what it means to have healthcare access. Our Our small size also means access of a different sort. We're fortunate to be able to reach our elected officials with just a phone call or two. And because we're small, federal support and cooperation has an even bigger impact on our community. A thriving business sector has developed with hundreds of local jobs in the tech industry. Through software development, engineering services, and communications consulting, these businesses are the ones wiring rural areas around the world. Having a robust fiber network is critical to the work they do. So what does being small really mean? Well, for us, it means being able to raise our family in the safety and security of a great community, close to friends and family. And even though we're perceived as remote, we can get anywhere in town in just a few minutes. Let us show you. See, morning commute with coffee in under 10 minutes. Being small allows us to work together to make our community a better place. And it's that collaboration that keeps us moving forward to the next great opportunity. You know, all the technology in the world can't replace the relationships. This is an unparalleled community with an uncommon lifestyle, with unbounded possibility. Mitchell, South Dakota. Outside expectations.
So that was Mitchell. Mitchell's only 15,000 people. Look what they were able to do. And they're able to attract a lot of people to come and be part of their community, and they're attracting investment as a result of that. Not only homegrown activities that they can export abroad, but foreign direct investment, and they become investment ready, which is a really important concept in economic development. Let's talk a little bit about innovation, obviously, but I'm not going to show this this next video. We've got, just to stay on time, we have a couple other videos I'd like to show you. But innovation is a really important piece of this whole thing. Through innovation, that's how prosperity happens in communities. So you have to figure out a strategy for working in your innovation ecosystem. Hopefully some of your panels will focus on that during the day as well. But let's take a look at this one, because I think, Stephen, you were talking about New Zealand. Let's take a look at this one. We'll skip the next one instead. I think this is a good one to show you.
In 2009, the internet in New Zealand was slow, and many people didn't have access at all, particularly in rural areas. All the advantages of broadband internet, just a dream for most people. But then we embarked on an amazing broadband and cellular journey. We committed to making our communications network one of the best in the world through two major initiatives. And we've come a long way in a short time, thanks to the government's broadband rollout. New Zealand is one of the world leaders in broadband connectivity. Internet speeds have more than tripled since 2008, and we're set to double that again. Mobile coverage has also increased dramatically thanks to hundreds of new and upgraded towers. Right now, we're on track to having more than 80% of New Zealanders with access to ultra-fast broadband. It will be available to more than 1.5 million households, hospitals, schools, and businesses, like eco-adventure operator Rotorua Canopy Tours. Their business depends on fast, reliable internet for accounting, reservations, check-in services, database management, and marketing. Providing customers with photos of their experience is a big draw card.
On a busy day, we can be uploading up to sort of 800, 1,000 high-res images.
Under the Rural Broadband Initiative, 90% of rural New Zealanders will have access to faster broadband.
The new rural broadband network, if you like, is really enabling us to take our business to the next level.
So what high-speed broadband does is just allow you to do a whole lot more on the farm with the data, the monitoring, the telemetry, you name it.
Manaia View School in Whangarei was the first school to get fibre broadband.
I like making your own stuff on it and uploading videos and learning new things. That's me, and it's me saying my whakapapa.
New Zealand has been on an amazing journey. Broadband speeds and coverage have improved dramatically. And there's more to come. Additional funds have been allocated to extend ultra-fast broadband, expand the Rural Broadband Initiative, and improve mobile coverage even further. You can check your coverage at broadbandmap.nz.
So that's what Stephen was talking about across New Zealand. We'll also see that not only in Australia with their national broadband network, but we had that opportunity back in 2001. That's when the Canadian government said we were going to have broadband across all of Canada. That was dropped because not only was 2001 with 9/11 something that they were able to divert the funding for, and then only put $100 million to rural broadband instead of